Welcome back. The National Institute of Standards and Technology will use automation to streamline the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program certification process. Using open security controls assessment language could shorten the assessment process by weeks. Nick Sinai, Senior Advisor at Insight Partners, former Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the United States. Nick, welcome back. It's good to see you. The story that Jason Miller has up on Federal News Network about this says, through the development of a common machine-readable language, I mentioned open security controls assessment language, NIST is bringing automation to the program. Is this the first one of these, or is this just a different iteration of this type of common open language?
Hey, Francis, great to see you again. So NIST is working on the standard. They've been working on it with industry for the last few years. And it appears that they're about to go to version 1 of the standard. And just backing up to give your viewers a little bit of context, the whole idea here is how do we automate FEDRAMP? How do we make it easier for the assessors, the auditors, the FEDRAMP program office, and the agency officials to review packages, to organize their information, and to bring machine learning even to the process. And so this is essentially a way to get from the Word documents and the Excel spreadsheets and the 1,000-page static documents and start to represent these artifacts as machine readable data that you can transmit to each other.
And the key phrase there, the two words that are the most important, is machine readable, right? Because when you apply automation to these, this is what's going to speed companies through this process a lot more rapidly than they're able to now, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to create a 1,000-page static document. So they're called these SSPs, these security plans. And those are static, several 1,000-page documents, right? And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're getting out of date as soon as you've written them. But if we can start to represent the vulnerability scans, the penetration testing, all of the documentation, which is a lot of what FedRAMP is documentation. If we can represent that in standard machine-readable ways, then we can, essentially the software that the assessors and the auditors and the GRC tools, they can all build OSCAL into their software product and make it easier for the emerging software vendors to get through the FedRAMP process.
Will this look differently or work differently for the vendors than the process does now, Nick?
I really hope so. And it's not that the young software companies, like the kind of companies that Insight invests in, it's not like they're going to have to implement OSCAL. This is really for the companies, the consulting companies, and the auditors and the GRC tools. They're the ones that are going to be using OSCAL. And so that's what's great here is an emerging software vendor just wants to sell to the federal government, right? And they want to do it securely, but they also don't want to get they don't want to spend all the money and the time to go through FedRAMP. And this is one piece of the puzzle of how do we streamline, how do we automate, how do we bring concurrency. And certainly a standard like this that the entire industry can rally around and build into their tools is a way to bring some automation to the process.
Once this exists, once this version 1.0 is out and we know that it's doing what it's intended, how can this apply in other places? Where are other places across certification processes or whatever that this concept could work?
Well, I think it could help with reciprocity. We have some loose reciprocity between the FedRAMP and some of the DoD cloud certification processes, but I think we could improve and tighten some of that. This could make it easier for reciprocity from one agency to another. And I think it also helps the essentially managed security service for vendors who want to provide that to emerging software vendors. So let me just explain that for a second. What I'm talking about is instead of a software vendor having to do every last documentation, imagine essentially this kind of thing provided as a service, which includes the security tools, the documentation, and the continuous monitoring. And that just makes it easier, especially when you're deploying on a cloud provider, so that you're not responsible for all the documentation in perpetuity.
We have a little bit more than a minute left, Nick. Any risks that either the FedRAMP team, the NIST team, the vendors, anybody should be paying attention to through this process?
Well, I think that we still need to properly resource the FEDRAMP office, and so I think there's a macro level risk. It's not a risk about the standard, but we absolutely need to give the FEDRAMP offices the kind of resources that they need, and that's true of the DISA process as well. I mean, we're essentially have a single-threaded, under-resourced, and a chicken and egg kind of challenge with FEDRAMP, and so we have to figure out ways how to bring automation, but also additional resources if we're really going to get the next generation vendors the kind of certification so that the federal government can use these great products.
A quick final thought, Nick. What will you watch as this process develops?
I think I'm going to watch to see if the standard will be built into the tooling, into the assessors and the auditors, and ultimately I hope that software vendors provide this kind of capability into the tools that the actual authorizing officials and FEDRAMP program office use. Let's bring automation and software to them as well so that they can start to speed up the process.
Nick Sinai, thanks very much for coming back. Great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Francis.